Dorothy Williams woke up on her 80th birthday feeling different than any other morning. The warm sunlight streamed through her bedroom curtains, highlighting the collection of framed photographs that told the story of her remarkable life. She had spent 45 years teaching mathematics at Lincoln High School, touching countless young lives while carefully saving every extra penny she earned. Her modest three-bedroom house, paid off 20 years ago, held memories of raising three successful children as a widow. Her husband, James Sr., had passed away when their youngest was just 12, leaving Dorothy to manage both family and finances alone. But she had done more than just manage, she had thrived. That morning, as she sipped her usual cup of chamomile tea in her sunny kitchen, Dorothy's eyes kept drifting to the Mercedes-Benz magazine on her counter. Her grandson Michael had left it there last week, knowing his grandmother's secret dream. For decades, Dorothy had watched others drive these luxury cars, admiring their elegant lines and prestigious reputation. She had always told herself, maybe someday. The previous evening, Dorothy had checked her bank accounts one more time. Her investments had done exceptionally well over the years, thanks to her natural talent with numbers and careful planning. The daughter of sharecroppers, she had learned the value of money early in life. While other teachers spent their earnings on vacations and fancy clothes, Dorothy invested in stocks and bonds, studying the market with the same dedication she brought to her classroom. Well, she said to herself, straightening her shoulders, someday is today. Dorothy spent the next 2 hours getting ready. She chose her finest outfit, a tailored navy blue suit she had worn to her daughter's law school graduation, paired with the pearl necklace James had given her on their last anniversary together. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, and she applied light makeup with a steady hand. In her large leather handbag, she carefully placed her banking documents, proof of investments, and the excellent credit score report she had printed out the night before. Before leaving, Dorothy caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. She saw not just an 80-year-old woman, but a person who had broken barriers her entire life. She had been among the first black teachers to integrate the city's school system in the 1960s, facing daily challenges with unwavering dignity. She had earned her master's degree while working full-time and raising 3 children alone. She had put all 3 of those children through college and graduate school. "You've earned this," she told her reflection firmly. The drive to Silver Star Luxury Motors took 20 minutes. Dorothy had researched thoroughly, knowing this dealership had the exact model she wanted. A silver E-Class Mercedes-Benz sedan. She had spent hours online learning about the features, reading reviews, and comparing prices. Her grandson had even printed out the current market values and dealer invoice prices, which were tucked neatly in her folder of documents. As she pulled into the dealership's parking lot in her well-maintained but aging Toyota Camry, Dorothy felt a mixture of excitement and determination. The showroom ahead gleamed with polished windows and bright lights, showcasing rows of pristine luxury vehicles. Through the glass, she could see salespeople in crisp suits moving about, attending to their daily tasks. Dorothy took a deep breath, remembering the words she had told her students countless times over the years. Your worth isn't determined by how others see you, but by how you see yourself. She had saved $95,000 for this purchase, more than enough for a significant down payment or even a full cash buy if she chose. Gathering her handbag and folder, Dorothy stepped out of her Camry, standing tall despite her petite frame. The click of her sensible yet elegant heels echoed across the parking lot as she walked toward the showroom entrance. The morning sun reflected off the building's glass surface, almost as if lighting her way forward. As she reached for the door handle, Dorothy whispered a quiet prayer, not for courage, as she had plenty of that, but for patience. After 80 years of life, she knew well enough that some battles were still being fought, even in places as polished and prestigious as this one. But Dorothy Williams had never been one to back down from a challenge, and she wasn't about to start now. The automatic doors slid open with a soft whoosh, welcoming her into the cool, air-conditioned showroom. Little did anyone inside know that this elegant elderly woman was about to teach them all a valuable lesson, one that couldn't be measured in dollars and cents. The Mercedes-Benz showroom was everything Dorothy had imagined and more. The floor sparkled like glass, reflecting the gleaming vehicles that stood proudly on display. Soft classical music played in the background, and the air smelled of leather and new cars. 4 salespeople were visible, 3 men and 1 woman, all dressed in expensive dark suits. Dorothy's eyes immediately found what she was looking for: There it stood, in all its glory, a silver E-Class Mercedes-Benz sedan, exactly like the one she had researched. The price tag showed $85,000, well within her carefully planned budget. She walked over to it slowly, her heart beating a little faster as she admired its beautiful lines and elegant design. A young couple entered the showroom shortly after Dorothy. They looked to be in their mid-30s, wearing casual but expensive clothes. Immediately, two salespeople rushed to greet them, offering coffee and water with bright smiles. Dorothy noticed this but kept her focus on the car, bending slightly to look at its luxurious interior through the window. 15 minutes passed. During this time, three salespeople walked past Dorothy multiple times. One even brushed against her handbag while hurrying to show another car to the young couple, but didn't stop to acknowledge her presence. Dorothy remained calm, though she felt her teacher's patience being tested. She had faced similar treatment before, in restaurants, in high-end stores, and even in her early teaching days. The showroom began to fill with more activity. A man in a business suit came in and was immediately attended to. A woman in yoga clothes arrived to pick up her car from service and was greeted warmly. Still, Dorothy stood alone beside the silver E-Class, becoming less invisible by the minute as her straight posture and dignified presence demanded attention. Finally, after 23 minutes, Dorothy had been counting, as mathematics teachers often do, a young salesman approached her. He looked to be in his late 20s, with perfectly styled hair and an expensive watch on his wrist. The badge on his suit read Brad Thompson, sales associate. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his voice carrying a tone that Dorothy recognized all too well, the kind that assumed she was lost or confused. "Are you waiting for someone? Perhaps your children? Or do you need directions somewhere?" Dorothy turned to face him fully, her pearl necklace catching the showroom lights. "No, young man," she replied, her voice clear and steady, carrying the authority of someone who had commanded classrooms for over 4 decades. "I'm interested in purchasing this E-Class Mercedes-Benz." Brad's expression changed quickly, from polite dismissal to poorly hidden amusement. He glanced around the showroom, as if looking for hidden cameras or waiting for someone to reveal a joke. "This particular model?" he asked, emphasizing particular in a way that made Dorothy's grip tighten slightly on her handbag. "It's quite expensive. Perhaps I could show you something more suitable." Dorothy had prepared for this moment. She opened her large leather handbag and pulled out her folder of documents. "I've done my research, Mr. Thompson," she said, using the same tone she had once used with students who hadn't done their homework. "I know exactly what this car costs, what features it includes, and what the dealer invoice price is. I'd also have here," she continued, pulling out specific papers, "documentation of my credit score, which is 850, and proof of funds for either a substantial down payment or a full cash purchase, whichever makes more financial sense." Brad's face reddened slightly, but instead of apologizing or changing his approach, he took a step back. "I'm actually quite busy with other customers right now," he said, though Dorothy could clearly see the young couple from earlier had left, and only one other customer was in the showroom. "Perhaps you could come back another time? Maybe bring your family with you." Other salespeople had stopped their activities to watch the interaction. Some pretended to be busy with paperwork, but their attention was clearly on the scene unfolding before them. The classical music continued to play softly in the background, a stark contrast to the tension building in the air. Dorothy stood perfectly still, her expression calm but determined. In her 45 years of teaching, she had faced down rowdy teenagers, angry parents, and resistant administrators. This young man's dismissal was nothing new, but that didn't make it right. She reached into her bag once more, this time for her phone, knowing exactly what her next step would be. The lesson was about to begin, though not the kind she used to teach in her classroom. Dorothy's fingers moved swiftly over her phone screen, pulling up the contact she needed. Before she could make the call, however, the showroom's atmosphere shifted. A tall man in an expensive gray suit emerged from a back office, walking quickly toward her. His gold name tag identified him as Richard Bennett, general manager. "Is there a problem here?" Mr. Bennett asked, his voice carrying across the quiet showroom. He looked between Dorothy and Brad, who was still standing awkwardly a few feet away. The manager's smile seemed friendly, but his eyes showed concern, not for Dorothy's experience, but for something else entirely. Dorothy lowered her phone but didn't put it away. "Yes, Mr. Bennett. "There is quite a problem," she replied, her voice clear and strong. "I've been in your showroom for nearly 30 minutes. During that time, I watched 5 other customers receive immediate attention while your staff walked past me repeatedly. When this young man finally approached me, he suggested I was lost and then refused to show me the car I'm interested in purchasing." Brad quickly jumped in. "Sir, I was just explaining to this lady that we're very busy today and—" "I can see exactly how busy you are," Dorothy interrupted, gesturing to the nearly empty showroom. She pulled out her documents again. "I came prepared to make a significant purchase today. I've been a mathematics teacher for 45 years, Mr. Bennett. I understand numbers very well, including the ones on this price tag." The manager's face shifted through several expressions: surprise, embarrassment, and finally, what looked like calculated concern. He moved closer, lowering his voice. "Ma'am, why don't we step into my office? I'm sure we can sort this out. Perhaps we could look at some of our other models that might be more comfortable for someone of your experience." Dorothy felt a familiar fire rising in her chest, the same one she felt decades ago when facing discrimination in her early teaching years. She stood straighter, her full height barely reaching the manager's shoulder, but her presence somehow filling the space. "Mr. Bennett," she said, her voice now carrying the tone that had quieted rowdy classrooms for nearly half a century, "I don't need to see other models. I've done my research. I know exactly what car I want, what it costs, and what it should cost you. What I'm not sure about is whether you understand who you're dealing with." She raised her phone, now recording the interaction. "My son, James Williams, is a civil rights attorney. My daughter sits on the city council. My grandson, who helped me research this purchase, works for the local news station. But more importantly, I am a customer with excellent credit and cash to spend who has been treated poorly in your establishment." The showroom had gone completely silent. Even the background music seemed quieter. Other salespeople had stopped pretending to work and were watching openly now. Brad had taken several steps back, his face pale. Mr. Bennett's professional smile faltered. "Now, Ms. Williams," Dorothy supplied firmly. "Dorothy Williams. The same Dorothy Williams who was among the first black teachers to integrate this city's schools in 1963. The same Dorothy Williams who has spent 45 years teaching young people that their worth isn't determined by how others see them, but by their own capabilities and character." She paused, letting her words sink in. Then she continued, her voice softer but no less powerful. "I came here today to buy a car, Mr. Bennett. A specific car. I didn't come for excuses, suggestions about more suitable vehicles, or to be treated like I'm lost or confused. I came as a customer, with money to spend and excellent credit. The question now is not whether I can afford your cars, but whether your dealership deserves my business." The recording was still running on her phone, capturing every word. Through the showroom windows, Dorothy could see other customers arriving, some pausing to watch the scene inside. Mr. Bennett's face had lost its condescending smile, replaced by something that looked more like genuine worry. Dorothy knew this moment well. It was the same one she'd experienced countless times in her classroom, when a student finally realized they had severely underestimated both the lesson and the teacher. She waited patiently, her phone still recording, ready to hear what the manager would say next. The real education was about to begin. Mr. Bennett glanced nervously at Dorothy's phone, which was still recording, then at the small crowd of customers gathering outside the showroom windows. His mind raced through different scenarios, none of them good for the dealership. He had been in the car business for 20 years, but this situation was quickly spinning beyond his control. "Ms. Williams," he began, switching to his most professional voice, "please, let me personally assist you today. Brad, you can return to your other duties." Brad quickly walked away, clearly relieved to escape the situation he had created. Mr. Bennett gestured toward his office. "Shall we discuss this somewhere more comfortable?" Dorothy shook her head firmly. "No, Mr. Bennett. We can discuss this right here. I've already spent enough time being invisible in your showroom. I won't be moved to a back office now that I'm finally being seen." A young woman had entered the showroom and was quietly recording the scene with her own phone. 2 more customers stood near the entrance, watching with interest. The other salespeople tried to look busy, but kept glancing over at the unfolding situation. Mr. Bennett loosened his tie slightly. "Of course, You're absolutely right. Let's look at the E-Class you're interested in. He walked toward the silver car, his shoes clicking against the polished floor. This is one of our most popular models. However, he added, unable to help himself, we do have some excellent C-Class options that many of our older customers prefer. Dorothy's expression remained calm, but her eyes flickered with disappointment. Mr. Bennet, she interrupted, I'm beginning to wonder if you're actually listening to me. Let me be very clear. I have the funds and credit to purchase any car in this showroom. The reason I chose the E-Class is not because of what other people prefer. I chose it because I researched every model extensively and determined this was the best fit for my needs. She opened her folder again, pulling out detailed printouts of the car's specifications. The E-Class offers superior comfort with its air suspension system, which will be helpful for my weekly drives to visit my grandchildren. The advanced safety features are exactly what I need for both city and highway driving. And the trunk space is perfect for transporting supplies to the community center where I volunteer. Mr. Bennet's face showed surprise at her detailed knowledge. Dorothy continued, Now, would you like to discuss actual numbers, or should I continue my car search at another dealership? One that might be more interested in making a sale than making assumptions. The young woman who had been recording spoke up from nearby. Excuse me, but are you really Ms. Dorothy Williams, the teacher from Lincoln High? When Dorothy nodded, the woman smiled broadly. You taught my mother. She always talks about how you changed her life. She's a mathematics professor now at the State University. This information seemed to hit Mr. Bennet like a physical force. His face paled slightly as he realized the situation was growing more complicated by the minute. Not only was he dealing with a well-prepared customer with money to spend, but she was also someone with deep connections in the community. Ms. Williams, he said quickly, please accept my sincere apologies for any misunderstanding. Let me show you all the features of the E-Class properly. He reached for a brochure, but his hands were shaking slightly. We can discuss financing options, or if you prefer to make a cash purchase. First, Dorothy interrupted, still recording, I'd like you to explain why you assumed I couldn't afford this car. Then I'd like you to explain why you suggested a lower-priced model without knowing anything about my finances. After that, we can discuss whether I still want to make a purchase here. The showroom had grown so quiet that the soft hum of the air conditioning seemed loud. More people had gathered outside, some pressing their faces against the windows. Mr. Bennet tugged at his tie again, feeling the weight of all the eyes on him. Dorothy stood patiently, her phone steady in her hand, waiting for answers. She had spent decades teaching young minds about numbers, probability, and logic. Now she was teaching a different kind of lesson, one about dignity, respect, and the danger of making assumptions. And like all good teachers, she was prepared to wait until her students showed real understanding. The tension in the showroom reached a new level when Dorothy's phone suddenly rang, its cheerful tune cutting through the silence. She glanced at the screen and smiled. It was her son, James Williams, Jr., returning her earlier text message. Perfect timing, just as she had planned. Excuse me, Mr. Bennet, Dorothy said calmly, but I need to take this call. It's my son, the civil rights attorney I mentioned earlier. She pressed the speaker button, making sure her phone's recording was still running too. Hello, James. You're on speakerphone, dear. Mom, is everything okay? I just saw your text about the dealership. James's deep, professional voice filled the showroom. Several heads turned at the sound of it. His reputation in the city was well known. Do you need me to come down there? Mr. Bennet's face turned an even paler shade. He quickly stepped forward, hands raised. Ms. Williams, surely there's no need to involve your son. I'm happy to offer you our best price on the E-Class right now. In fact, I can even throw in some extras at no cost. Dorothy held up one hand to stop him, then spoke into the phone. James, I've been here for almost an hour now. When I first arrived, no one would help me. Then a young salesman suggested I was lost and needed directions. When I explained I wanted to buy the E-Class, he told me to come back with my family because he was too busy, in an almost empty showroom. She looked directly at Mr. Bennet as she continued. Then the manager here, Mr. Bennet, suggested I might prefer a cheaper model without even asking about my budget or looking at my financial documents. The young woman who had recognized Dorothy earlier stepped forward. I got most of it on video, Mr. Williams, she called out. I'm sending it to the news station right now. I work there as an intern. James's voice grew stern. I see. Mom, I'm on my way. Don't sign anything until I get there. Mr. Bennett, I suggest you don't try to handle this situation alone. You might want to call your corporate office. Through the showroom windows, Dorothy could see more people gathering. Someone had posted about the situation on social media, and word was spreading quickly. A few people held up their phones, recording through the glass. Among them, Dorothy recognized several former students and their parents. Mr. Bennett's hands were shaking as he pulled out his own phone. Miss Williams, please. Let's resolve this professionally. I'm deeply sorry for how you were treated. What can we do to make this right? Dorothy looked around the showroom at all the faces watching her. She saw the young salespeople who needed to learn this lesson early in their careers. She saw her former student's daughter, still recording everything. She saw the mixture of shame and fear on Mr. Bennett's face. This was a teachable moment, just like the thousands she had used in her classroom over the years. Mr. Bennett, she said clearly, making sure her phone picked up every word. What happened here today isn't just about me buying a car. It's about how you and your staff make assumptions about people based on their age and race. It's about the customers who came before me who might have been too hurt or afraid to speak up. It's about the customers who might come after me. James's voice came through the speaker again. I'm 10 minutes away, Mom. The local news van is right behind me. Mr. Bennett was now on his own phone, speaking quietly but urgently to someone. Other employees had gathered in small groups, whispering among themselves. Brad, the original salesman, was nowhere to be seen. Dorothy stood tall, her pearls gleaming under the showroom lights. She thought about all her years of teaching, about showing her students that standing up for yourself didn't mean losing your dignity. She thought about the day she first walked into an all-white school as one of its first black teachers, holding her head high despite the stares and whispers. Now then, she said, addressing everyone in the showroom, while we wait for my son and the news team, perhaps we should talk about what real customer service looks like. After 45 years of teaching, I find that every difficult moment can be turned into a valuable lesson. The sound of sirens in the distance told her that this lesson was about to reach a much bigger classroom than she had originally planned. Within 30 minutes, the quiet luxury car dealership had transformed into a scene of intense activity. 2 local news vans were parked outside, their cameras rolling. James Williams Jr., wearing a sharp business suit, stood protectively next to his mother. Social media was exploding with the story, and something unexpected was happening. People were coming forward with their own stories. Ms. Williams, a reporter from Channel 5 held out her microphone. Our station has received dozens of calls in the last hour. Many people say they know you. Could you tell us about your background? Dorothy smoothed her navy suit and spoke clearly, just as she had done in front of countless classrooms. I spent 45 years teaching mathematics at Lincoln High School, but before that, in 1963, I was one of 5 black teachers chosen to integrate the city's school system. The reporter's eyes widened. You're that Dorothy Williams. James smiled proudly at his mother as she continued. Yes, I am. Back then, many people didn't think I belonged in that school. Just like today, some people didn't think I belonged in this dealership. But I knew my worth then, and I know it now. More people were gathering outside. Among them was Mayor Thompson, who had heard about the incident and rushed over. He pushed through the crowd and entered the showroom. Dorothy, he called out warmly. I can't believe this. You taught both my children calculus. He turned to the cameras. This woman changed our city's education system. When others doubted that inner-city students could handle advanced mathematics, Ms. Williams proved them wrong. Her students have become doctors, engineers, and yes, even mayors. Mr. Bennett, who had been on the phone with his corporate office, looked increasingly uncomfortable. The story was growing bigger than a simple case of poor customer service. Dorothy Williams wasn't just any 80-year-old customer. She was a living piece of the city's civil rights history. A woman in her 40s pushed through the crowd. Miss Williams, do you remember me? Maria Rodriguez? You tutored me after school for an entire year. I'm a mathematics professor now at the university. More former students began sharing their stories with the reporters. One was a bank president. Another owned a successful tech company. A third was a famous research scientist. All of them credited Dorothy Williams with changing their lives. The young intern who had recorded everything was busy posting updates online. "The video has gone viral," she announced. "Over 100,000 views in just 20 minutes. People are sharing their own Ms. Williams stories with the hashtag dignity and respect." James checked his phone and smiled. "Mom, your story just got picked up by national news. They're calling you the teacher who taught another lesson at 80. Dorothy stood quietly in the middle of it all, watching as her simple plan to buy a car had turned into something much more meaningful. She saw Mr. Bennett reading messages on his phone, his face growing more concerned by the minute. The corporate office had seen the viral videos and was sending representatives immediately. "Ms. Williams," Mr. Bennett said desperately, "please, let us make this right. We'll give you any car on the lot at cost." "Will?" Dorothy raised her hand, silencing him just as she used to quiet her classroom. "Mr. Bennett, this isn't about getting a discount. This is about dignity. This is about respect. This is about all the people who face discrimination but don't have a viral video to help them be heard." The mayor nodded in agreement. "Dorothy's right. This isn't just about one incident. This is about how we treat all members of our community." More former students continued to arrive, each with their own story about how Ms. Williams had taught them more than just mathematics. She had taught them about dignity, perseverance, and standing up for what was right. Dorothy looked around at all the faces, her former students, the news cameras, the shocked dealership staff, and her proud son. She thought about the young people watching this unfold on their phones and computers. Once again, she found herself in front of a classroom, though much larger than any she'd taught in before. The lesson wasn't over yet. In fact, it was just beginning to reach its most important part, the part where real change could happen. By evening, the Silver Star Luxury Motors showroom had become the center of a storm that no one had expected. The corporate team from Mercedes-Benz headquarters had arrived in 3 black SUVs, their faces serious as they entered the dealership. Leading them was Sarah Chen, the regional vice president, who had canceled 3 meetings to handle this situation personally. "Ms. Williams," Sarah said, walking directly to Dorothy and extending her hand. "I watched the videos on my way here. I don't have words to express how deeply sorry we are for how you were treated today." Dorothy shook her hand firmly. The showroom was now filled with important people, corporate executives, local news teams, city officials, and many of Dorothy's former students who had refused to leave until they saw justice done. James stood beside his mother, reviewing documents on his tablet. Sarah Chen turned to face the cameras, knowing this moment would be watched by millions. "Effective immediately, we're making several changes," she announced. "First, Mr. Thompson has been terminated from his position. Brad, the dismissive salesman, had already cleaned out his desk and left through the back door." She continued, "Mr. Bennett will be required to step down as general manager and undergo comprehensive sensitivity training before being considered for any future management positions." Mr. Bennett stood in the corner, his earlier confidence completely gone. "But that's not enough," Sarah added. "This incident has shown us a serious problem in our corporate culture. Therefore, we are announcing a new initiative." She looked at Dorothy with genuine respect. "Ms. Williams, would you consider helping us create a training program for all our dealerships nationwide?" The room fell silent, waiting for Dorothy's response. She thought carefully before speaking, just as she had done countless times in her classroom when students asked important questions. "Ms. Chen," Dorothy replied, "I spent 45 years teaching young people that mathematics wasn't just about numbers. It was about logical thinking and solving real-world problems. If you're serious about making real change, I'm willing to help." Sarah nodded eagerly. "We want to create the Dorothy Williams standard of service. Every employee in every dealership will need to pass this training program, and we'd like to offer you a consulting position to help develop and oversee it." The news cameras captured everything as Sarah outlined the other changes. Mandatory monthly diversity and inclusion training for all staff. Mystery shoppers from diverse backgrounds to test customer service. A new customer feedback system focused on equal treatment. Quarterly reviews of sales patterns to check for discrimination. Scholarships for minority students interested in automotive careers. James reviewed the proposed contract on his tablet. "They're serious, Mom," he said quietly. "This could help a lot of people." Dorothy's former students in the crowd began sharing more stories. One woman told how Dorothy had helped her believe in herself when no one else would. A man shared how she had visited his family after his father lost his job, bringing groceries and hope. Each story showed that Dorothy had always been about more than just teaching. She had been about changing lives. The young intern who had recorded the original video was still updating social media. The hashtag dignity and respect is now trending nationwide, she announced. People are sharing similar stories from dealerships all over the country. You've started a movement, Ms. Williams. Mayor Thompson stepped forward. Dorothy, you taught our city another valuable lesson. This is why we're also announcing a citywide review of customer service policies in all luxury retail establishments. As the evening went on, more changes were announced. The dealership would host monthly community meetings about customer service. A scholarship fund would be established in Dorothy's name. A plaque would be installed in the showroom telling her story. The staff would volunteer at local schools to mentor students. Dorothy stood in the middle of it all, straight and dignified in her navy suit and pearls. She hadn't come to the dealership planning to start a movement or create lasting change. She had simply come to buy a car and be treated with respect. But like so many of her best lessons over the years, this one had taken on a life of its own. As she watched Sarah Chen fire up a PowerPoint presentation about the new changes, Dorothy smiled. Sometimes the best teaching moments happened outside the classroom, and this lesson was far from over. 1 month after the incident that changed everything, Dorothy Williams pulled into the parking lot of Hampton Mercedes-Benz, a different dealership across town. This time, something was very different. As she stepped out of her old Toyota Camry, a small welcoming committee was waiting for her. Ms. Williams, called out Lisa Jackson, the dealership's first black female sales manager. We've been expecting you. Lisa had specifically requested to handle Dorothy's purchase after following her story. Behind her stood several staff members, all wearing pins that read Dignity and Respect, the Dorothy Williams standard. The showroom sparkled just like the first one had, but the atmosphere couldn't have been more different. On one wall hung a large photograph of Dorothy teaching mathematics in 1963, standing proudly in front of her first integrated classroom. The dealership had requested permission to display it as inspiration for their staff. Your E-Class is ready, Lisa said warmly, leading Dorothy to a beautiful silver Mercedes-Benz that looked exactly like the one she had originally wanted. We've added every safety feature you requested, and I've personally made sure everything is exactly as you specified. As Dorothy walked around the car, she noticed a group of young salespeople watching from nearby. They weren't staring with suspicion or dismissal like at the other dealership. They were watching with admiration. Many of them had already completed the first round of the new Dorothy Williams standard training program. Ms. Williams, one young salesman called out nervously. Would you mind if we took a picture with you? My mother was actually one of your students in 1975. She's a bank manager now, and she cried when she saw your story on the news. Dorothy smiled warmly. Of course, young man, but first, tell me, what did you learn in the new training program? The young salesman stood straighter. We learned that dignity and respect aren't extra features. They come standard with every interaction. We learned to see people for who they are, not who we assume them to be. While Lisa prepared the purchase paperwork, more people arrived at the dealership. Local news cameras were there again, but this time they were recording a victory, not a controversy. Dorothy's son James came to review the contracts, though this time as a proud son rather than a concerned attorney. Mom, he said, looking over the papers, everything is perfect. They're even matching the corporate office's donation to your scholarship fund. The scholarship fund had grown beyond anyone's expectations. In just 1 month, it had raised enough money to help 10 minority students pursue careers in automotive sales and management. 3 other car companies had started similar programs, not wanting to fall behind the new standard Dorothy had inspired. As Dorothy sat in the manager's office signing the final papers, she noticed something that made her smile. On Lisa's desk sat a familiar folder. It was the training manual for the Dorothy Williams Standard Program. Inside were not just rules about customer service, but real stories from people who had faced discrimination. It had become required reading for every luxury car dealership in the country. You know, Lisa said, following Dorothy's gaze to the manual, your story changed everything. Last week, an 85-year-old woman bought a sports car from us. The week before, a young black entrepreneur bought 3 cars for his company. Nobody blinked an eye. That's your legacy, Ms. Williams. Finally, the moment arrived. Lisa handed Dorothy the keys to her new Mercedes-Benz E-Class. As she sat in the driver's seat for the first time, Dorothy thought about how this car represented so much more than just a purchase. It represented every student she had taught to believe in themselves, every barrier she had helped break down, and every person who would face fewer obstacles because of what had happened. The small crowd applauded as Dorothy started the engine. Through the windshield, she could see her old Toyota being taken away. She had donated it to a local charity that helped low-income students get to college. Her new car's license plate holder read, "Dignity and respect. Every mile, every day." As she drove out of the dealership, Dorothy caught her reflection in the rearview mirror. She saw not just an 80-year-old woman in a luxury car, but a teacher who had never stopped teaching, a fighter who had never stopped fighting, and a champion for change who had turned a moment of humiliation into a movement of hope. The silver Mercedes-Benz glided smoothly down the street, carrying not just Dorothy Williams, but the dreams and dignity of generations to come.